learned that I'm dogged, that I can stick to something, but also I learned to deal with rejection.
Janet Constantino is a former competitive Latin ballroom dancer and journalist and has been a licensed psychotherapist since 1983. In 2015, she earned an MFA in creative writing from Pacific University. A practicing Buddhist, Janet has a grown son and twin granddaughters. She joins me today on Uncorking a Story to discuss her latest book, Becoming Mariella. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Janet.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
I'm happy to have you here, Janet. I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
Well, my first inkling that I wanted to be a writer was when I was in high school. And it was Mr. Bloom, one of my beloved English teacher. And he really was wonderful. He was the advisor to the school newspaper, and he had 3 sections of senior English, and he was everybody's favorite teacher. And so I was in one of his classes, and he asked us to write about my class. And so I did character sketches of the different students or different people in the class. And when I got the paper back, he said, this is one of the best papers in all 3 of my classes, and you have the makings of a writer. If you can learn how to make a scene and link everything together, and nobody had ever said that to me before, and so that stayed with me. And so all through college, I took writing classes, and I wrote a screenplay, and I wrote short stories, and this was also when I was in graduate school to be a psychologist or a psychotherapist. That the writing was always there, but I had to weave it in and out of my career, of my actual psychotherapy career. But it's always been there, and that was really the start. And this is the 3rd novel that I've written, but the first one that I've actually gotten published. And so it's been a long time. I mean, I've written for many, many years.
Yeah, it's a kind of going back to Mr. Bloom. We all need a Mr. Bloom in our life, I think. It's
Yes.
always great to have someone like that. For me, it was Mr. Bill O'Connell, who went by Mr. Bill, who was this really interesting guy because he was an English teacher, a Shakespeare fanatic, and he was the first person who told me that I had, something interesting to say in writing. I wrote a paper on Iago. We had to do a paper on Othello, and I chose to do a little character sketch on Iago. And he recognized something in me that kind of always stayed with me. But he was also one of the coaches of the football team. So he was this big dude who was this Shakespearean nut. You couldn't get any different than. In other words, he was not at a central casting for an English teacher.
Right. And yet he understood that sensitivity.
Yeah.
And saw it in you.
So I'm curious. You were interested in writing. What brought you into a career in psychotherapy?
Boy, that's a really good question. Well, probably being in my own psychotherapy, the experience of getting to know myself in a way that I hadn't before. And really, I've always been curious about what makes people tick. Why did you do that? What were you thinking? What's inside of you that makes you do what you do or think what you think? And that's true in writing too. I mean, we explore characters. I was working as the administrator of a medical clinic when I decided to go to graduate school for psychotherapy. And I found that the people who were the most interesting were the therapists who were on staff at this clinic. And as I said, having been in my own therapy, and I thought, well, these are the most interesting people there. They're the ones who really talk about what's going on. And so that's really, really what started me. And so as I said, I saw my very first client in 1983, I think, or actually 81, but officially I was licensed in 83. And I've taught and trained interns over the years, and now I have a very small practice. I'm just letting attrition take its place and phasing out. But I think it dovetails really well with writing, with sort of character building and writing about human nature.
Yeah, you got to get into a character's head, and you've got to make them feel authentic on the page.
Yeah,
And having that natural curiosity, the sort of curiosity that fuels your writing, is also sounds like what fueled your career choice as well.
Yes, I mean, I remember at one point saying to myself, if I had to choose between being a psychotherapist and being a writer, which would I choose? And I couldn't choose at that time, I mean, now it's writing, because I did really have a blossoming career as a psychotherapist, but they're both kind of from the same place.
Yeah. But practically speaking, something's got to pay the bills while you're trying to build a career as a writer.
That's right.
One thing that I'm curious about in your sort of approach to therapy, do you use creative writing at all as a tool for, as a therapeutic tool?
No. Dreams perhaps more than writing as a tool, but if people bring dreams, I find that very along the lines of creating something. The dream world is its own sort of phantasma, really.
Right, exploring the significance of those things that pop into our subconscious when we are not awake.
That's right.
Yeah, very cool. What can you share with us about Becoming Mariella?
Well, one of the things that people ask me all the time is, what made you choose to write this novel? What inspired you? And it was a question from a good friend who said, if you could write about anything that you wanted to write about, what would it be? And I went straight to, well, it would be Sicily or Italy, but specifically Sicily, because that's where my ancestors, or half of my ancestors, come from, half Irish and half Sicilian. And my grandmother never spoke English. I mean, she was right there. My father grew up in Sicily. And I visited relatives there and stayed there and have been there twice. But I feel a real sense of roots there. And one of the things that is really sort of, I hold as a value, both as a therapist and it came out in the character of Mariella, is her quest for being on her own path in life, of her own independence, her not just independent and free, but really following her own path. And so that's where I came up with the idea of a 22-year-old about to embark on life after college, and how could she get out from under the clutches of her mother, who wanted her to marry the son of a rich Sicilian and whom she loved, but she didn't want to get married. She wanted some life. And so she escapes to San Francisco with the help of her beloved grandmother, her Nonna, and embarks on her own life. And lots of things happen to her in San Francisco.
Yeah. Is it a present day novel?
It takes place in the year 2000.
Okay.
2001.
Interesting. Why did you choose that time period?
Quite honestly, it's because I am a technological idiot, and I thought the closer I am to contemporary life, the more I have to bring in all social media and all the techno stuff, which I'm really terrible at. So I thought if I'm in 2000, at least I can deal with computers and cell phones, but that's about it. Sending texts and emails.
Right. You don't have to worry about everything else that has happened since then.
Right, and all the jargon and the know-how, and so that's really why.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. You mentioned being, of Irish and Italian descent, and that is my makeup as well. I'm
Right?
Italian and Irish, but the Italian side of my family, which is my mother's side, was from Avellino, so outside of more Naples versus as far south as Sicily.
Okay, but not terribly far away.
Not too far. Not too far. Yeah. So, but I have not been there to the homeland, so to speak. My everyone else in my family has gone. I haven't. I wasn't able to make any of the trips that they took. But it's on my bucket list of places to go.
It's well worth it. Have you been to Italy?
No, never.
Oh, well, I wish you the opportunity to do that.
One thing that didn't escape me was that you mentioned this is the third novel you've written, but the first one that's been published. So I just want to get a sense of a little bit more of a backstory there.
Well, I still have the other novels in the drawer. I mean, the drawer that's full of me. If you know what that's like, the
Sure do.
writer's drawer or more. I think that they never felt complete enough to send. And this one, well, I did actually send out parts of them before. But I think they're not completed. I mean, they're there for me to go back to if I want to and shape them into something else. But as the term, the shaggy beast, they're still sort of shaggy beasts.
Right.
And this one took me 10, 12 years to write because I was still working and, doing many things along the way. So, but this one took shape and I stayed with it.
Yeah. But I think the lesson there for other writers, aspiring authors, is that, sometimes it's not the first one or the second one that hits or that gets put out in the world. Sometimes it takes a few tries, not to use a sports analogy, but I will, a few at bats before you get a base hit.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true with a lot of writers. It's not the first or second necessarily that gets them the on the shelf.
Right. We read about, well, so-and-so's debut novel, but I'll bet that a lot of those debut novels have, others that are before them in the drawer.
Right. There's some forgotten siblings, if you will.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit more about the writing process and you kind of what you learned about yourself as a writer by going through by writing Becoming Mariella.
Well, that's a really good question, too. What did I learn about myself as a writer? Well, I learned that I had the capacity to stick with it, which, I didn't abandon it. And that became very important. It was to not give up on it. And because when I went to graduate school for the MFA, it really helped me because that's what I took into, a piece of it to get accepted. And so I did a lot of work on it there. And my thesis included part of it, but I learned so much about what I didn't know getting the MFA. But say again what it was that you were saying. What did I learn about myself?
Yeah, like what any insights into yourself? I mean, so it sounds like, one thing is that you can do it, right? That you can actually start something and complete something of this magnitude. But I'm curious if any other insights sort of came to you. Because I think when we go through something that takes that long to do and you put so much of your effort and your time into it that, maybe we learn a few things about ourselves. I'm just curious about what lessons you may have learned.
Yeah. Yes, I learned that I'm dogged, that I can stick to something, but also I learned to deal with rejection because I sent the novel out a lot. I did get some bites from agents, and one in particular who read the whole novel and wanted me to work on a couple of things in it and send it back. And she ultimately said no, she thought the novel was too dark, which really surprised me because it's not, I don't know if you've read it, but it's not a dark book. And it's not fluffy, but it's not a dark book. But I learned to deal with rejection and keep at it and keep at it, and ended up with She Writes, which has been just a wonderful publisher. And Simon and Schuster is our distributor, which is great. And but I think stick-to-itiveness and learning to deal with rejection and believing in your own work, especially if you're open enough to getting feedback. I think being able to get feedback by trusted sources is really important. And I learned that I can take feedback and really use what's valuable and stick to what I really think is important if that's what it comes to.
Yeah, I think the lesson of dealing with rejection is an important one for other writers to hear, because it is an industry of no. The publishing industry can feel like an industry of no, between finding that elusive agent and, of course, sometimes you have to query 100 agents before you. That's right. Before you hear anything back. And oftentimes you don't really hear anything constructive back. Sometimes it's just a very uncreative form letter.
That's right. That's
saying
right.
Thanks, but no thanks. And
if you get a rejection that says, we really enjoyed this and this and this, but, and we'd like another, if you have something else, send that. But I mean, rejection comes in all forms.
It sure does. But also it's important to take feedback too.
Yes.
It's because the one thing is, you've got to learn not to, be so, and it's hard because you spend so much time writing. And of course, this is a baby that you've created. So it's very natural to be defensive about your writing. Right. But you also have to remember that there are people out there who know more about this business than we do, and their suggestions should be considered. Now, you don't have to always take somebody's suggestions, and there have been editors who have given me great feedback, and editors whose feedback I've questioned. But at the end of the day, they do know a little bit more about commercial success than I do. Right. So I mean personally, I have to, again, it's humbling, but you do have to take feedback.
That's right. And it is, from that perspective, it is a business. And I don't know how it is for you, but as a writer, that is not my strong suit, dealing with the business end of it, nor is it strong suit as a therapist. I mean, they're both kind of introverted things to do.
Yeah, well, especially if you are a self-published author or an independent author, as they say, you really do have to think about it as a business, because you're creating a product, right? Which is the book, the story. You've got to package it, so you've got to get the right cover on it. You've got to get it into distribution. You've got to price it the right way, and you've got to promote it. So thinking about all the 4 Ps of marketing, you've got to sort of align that and put it in the world. And if you want to be successful, you've got to think about it as a business.
That's right. And I'm very happy to have a publicist. I mean, I'm so grateful for her. She's just wonderful. I mean, she's really guided me on what to do with whom and when to do it. And she's taken care of the whole social media thing for me too. So I think she's the one who made contact with you.
Well, that is correct. That is correct. And just kind of getting back to why you set the book in 2000 versus present day.
That's right.
It's a whole new world of marketing and advertising out there. That's it's certainly not simple to try and do it on your own.
No, it's not. The other thing I learned, not so much about myself, was because in writing the book, I did a lot of research, but I also really delved into people in my own Sicilian family, their histories, and what life was like for them. My grandmother, for instance, and how isolated she must have felt coming from Sicily and not speaking English. And they moved initially into where she did have relatives in San Jose, California, and there was an Italian grocery store there, which I remember as a child and just loving, because I could run up and down the stairs and steal candy and sit at the player piano upstairs. But then they moved her to the suburbs where nobody spoke Italian, and and I remember her just always having headaches and being unhappy. And I thought, well, of course, she was so isolated. So I learned a lot about my relatives, and I have these sort of memoir kinds of things as if they were character memoirs. And I thought, well, I don't know what will come of that, whether I'll make those into something all on their own. I made a character sketch of Mama and one of the sisters in somebody's sister, and I thought, that's material that I might use at some point. I just don't know. But that's another thing that writing can do, is you can come up with all kinds of offshoots, and you have to determine, well, that's not for this book, but I'm going to put it aside, and who knows what will happen later.
Yeah, you could use it, for later fodder. But I think being able to tap into your own, family's history and just even getting into the mind of your grandmother, helps bring authenticity to the characters you're writing on the page.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the other lessons. You've got to write characters that are somewhat, authentic and three-dimensional versus versus two-dimensional. But it's funny. I remember my grandmother telling me stories when I was young about what it was like being an immigrant in this country. And her family came into the New York area. So I think they first, round one, because they came in two rounds. Round one, they came to Newark, New Jersey, which is actually where my grandmother was born. But then they moved back to Italy.
Yes.
And all of her siblings were born in Italy. So it's funny because my grandmother was the oldest, but she didn't present herself with an Italian accent. But, my Zizzy Carol, her sister, was, had full on Italian accent, like to the point where it was very hard to understand her sometimes. And I'm like, Grandma, why did she have an accent and not you? And then she told me, how they kind of boomeranged back and forth.
Back and forth.
But
that was the same with my family.
And she would tell me these stories about going to an Italian market where the people didn't speak English, or she couldn't, but seeing an immigrant, like an Italian immigrant, go to an American grocery store, and they would basically act out what it is they wanted. So if they wanted eggs, they would cluck like a chicken.
That's right. That's right.
I laughed so hard at that story because she would mimic, this person in the aisle, And
it just, it really underscores that image of Italians talking with their hands and.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. She once told me that she went to a store and a woman was trying to explain to a clerk what a colander was. And she said, macaroni and water go in, macaroni stay, water go bye-bye. That's how she explained what a colander was.
That's perfect, though. That's perfect.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, that's funny. I'm curious, when you were growing up, Janet, what were the types of stories that captured your attention?
Oh, well, my father went to college while I was growing up. And well, are you asking me what did I read?
Things that you like to read, things maybe you like to watch on TV or movies that captured your attention. I'm just curious as to what
I loved grown-up novels when I was a kid. I mean, I would sit in my room and read, and that was, I mean, I remember reading when I was around 9 or 10, reading like of Mice and Men, and oh gosh, I can't remember, but A Lust for Life, you know, the story of Van Gogh, and I liked reading stories about artists. When I was much younger, I remember reading Jean Craig, Nurse. It was, I think, the Canadian equivalent of not the Hardy Boys, but you know, the girl stories.
Yeah. Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew, thank you, that's it. But I like reading real stuff. You know, as a real little one, I loved the old-fashioned nursery rhymes that had beautiful illustrations. But I read early. I mean, really early, and reading was just one of my childhood passions. And I just think I read a lot. You know.
Well, that's the key to being a good writer, is being an avid reader, I think.
I think so too. When I was, and I remember this, that in my room, I had, as a really young child, I had flannel pictures of the Three Little Pigs or something, but the alphabet around them. And so I memorized the alphabet backwards and forwards. I can still say it backwards. But so when I went into kindergarten, I knew the alphabet already, you know. They thought I was some sort of whiz kid, but it's just that it was there all the time. So, right. You know, and our brains at that age, you can memorize a lot. So.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm blessed to have 3 kids who are all avid readers. And I mean, it cost me a lot of money in books, but I tell them, I'm like, you can go to the library. Like, it's not against the law to borrow a book so long as you return it.
That's right. Oh, but that's great that your kids read.
Yeah. What about music? What kind of music did capture your interest when you were growing up?
Well, I rhythm and blues. I really loved rhythm and blues. And in college, I loved jazz. I don't know how I got into that, but I did. More than pop music. Pop music wasn't sort of my favorite, and some classical as well. I took violin lessons and then the cello as a young person. I never was very good at it, but I think my taste in music was always eclectic, but I really liked really old-fashioned rhythm and blues, you know, and then in college, Dinah Washington, Ella Fitzgerald. I remember going to San Francisco to see her, and more blues than pop music, you know. Yeah. But I liked Motown too.
Yeah,
Motown.
Yeah,
and I like blues and jazz and classical.
Yeah, no, all great musical forms. My cousin Mick is a jazz enthusiast. He's also an author, but he writes young adult fiction featuring jazz musicians. So he's got one about Louis Armstrong. He's got one about Duke Ellington. It's amazing what he's been able to do, and you know, with the intent of trying to, you know, take a younger generation and introduce them to music that they may not know about.
That's right. So. What I don't know if did you ever hear of the Modern Jazz Quartet, MJQ, and
yeah, it's ringing a bell.
Oh, and I love Bob Dylan. I have to admit, I was a great Bob Dylan fan.
Oh, you talk about eclectic. He's had quite a career. Did you see the movie A Complete Unknown?
Yes, and I loved it.
I thought it was great. I mean, it brought a tear to my eye at like multiple points throughout that story.
Yeah. I wish that he had won the Academy Award, because I think he did such a grand job of not portraying Bob Dylan, but occupying the character, really.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he did a fantastic job. He's actually a very talented actor.
Isn't he, though? Starting with that movie, Call Me By Your Name.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that?
I know the movie and I know the subject matter, but I've never seen it.
It's a wonderful movie.
Yeah.
He did such he just became it. So
yeah. No, he's got a very long career ahead of him, without a doubt. And
so too.
Only a matter of time before he's giving an acceptance speech in front of Conan O'Brien.
I agree.
Janet, where can people learn more about you? Do you have a website or any of that dreaded social media that we were talking about earlier?
I do, actually, and it's janetconstantino.com. And on the website, there's a link to both Instagram and Facebook. I have both. And that's about it in terms of social media.
All right. Well, I'll be sure to put that in our show notes so people can find you nice and easily. And Janet, where can people pick up a copy of Becoming Mariella?
I would suspect through your local bookstore, or go to Amazon. I'm on Amazon in all its forms. And let's see, also on Barnes & Noble and Goodreads, I think. But, and you can order it through your local bookstore.
Very good. All right. Well, Janet, I will say thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you, Michael. It was really nice to meet you. And thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.